up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here on the DraftKings Network. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us that 5-star rating and check us out right here live 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on the DraftKings YouTube channel, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, and a host of other delightful streaming platforms here. Ryan Fitzpatrick, former NFL quarterback, Harvard man, going to join us here in a little bit, help get us ready for Thursday Night Football on Prime. But guys, right now, exciting times in the kingdom. We get to welcome back. It is Wednesday, and that means our friend Charlotte Wilder, co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan, coming through here with all of her Dick's Sporting Goods like balls in the background. Charlotte, what's going on, bud?
Yeah, isn't that nice? Dick's, if you're out there, think about it.
Yeah.
Not an ad, but could be.
Yeah, not an ad, could
Possibly
be an ad.
Possibly you.
Who's to say? Thank you, Mike. I'm so thrilled to be here. I have so many takes. I'm so excited to talk about everything we're going to talk about. And I also just really love when it's like Andrew Whitworth, a million-time pro everything, and it's like Ryan Fitzpatrick went to Harvard and was an NFL quarterback, and then it's like, but now Charlotte Wilder.
Wow, yeah. So you're right in that category of or above, Charlotte. That's all I have to say.
That is so sweet of you, but it really brings me great joy every time that happens.
Charlotte, you now know how I feel every time my dad introduces my brother-in-law, because I've been noticing it more and more lately that my dad really leans into the bio blast as if he's really a little bit more proud of what his son-in-law has accomplished, because every time it's, oh, my son-in-law, Ben Broniker, went to Harvard undergrad, played 4 years in the NFL. He's in medical school now. He's married my daughter. He's getting ready to be a father. And I'm like, all right, this is starting to sound like shade. I don't know if this is a hit dog hollering right now, but he's really leaning into this wrestling promo he's cutting for Ben.
Listen, I said I rank my kids every day, and that includes in-laws, and Ben has been at the top. I mean, I can't sit there and lie, right? I mean, just spot the lie. I mean, seriously, look at the kid's resume. He's
hard to argue.
Nowhere near the top. So
it's hard to argue with that resume.
Yeah, I mean, it really is hard to argue. You just read the resume. As you were reading the resume while you're doing it, weren't you even saying, well, damn, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, it all started actually kind of crack into form there. So
started to hit a little bit. Here's what I'm happy about is there are 4 of us on the set, and we almost equal the crowd in Tampa Bay yesterday for the postseason. Was that too soon?
Wow.
Too soon?
No, that was good. That was a sick
I'm sorry.
burn.
Seriously, postseason baseball started. 19,000 showed up in Tampa Bay. The lowest capacity in postseason since 1919 World Series in the Black Sox scandal. That's bad.
Oh,
that's really
makes
bad.
Me so sad.
I mean, don't worry. They're getting a new stadium, so some more people won't go in it. I have no idea. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to start out that way, because it's actually been fun watching the first day of postseason baseball as the games averaged 2 hours and 55 minutes as opposed to what they've been like 3.5 hours. So it's worked. The pitch clock has worked. The games are quicker. And I love watching postseason anyway. So a couple of road teams won. We'll get into that. Texas over Tampa Bay, Arizona over Milwaukee as far as the road team. So always good when and we got basketball starting in 20 days. It's a sports mecca right now.
We love it.
I do enjoy actually. Baseball's postseason is kind of getting up there with March Madness for me, of a sport where I casually pay attention during the regular season enough to be able to do the job here, but I don't have a team that I really follow, and so I'm not living it day in and day out the way Jared and the way so many baseball fans are. But man, I love coming through like a dumbass for postseason baseball, just getting ready to park down, watch. You got it on all afternoon here. Nick Castellanos is giving everyone a pseudo middle finger in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Bryce Harper's rolling through stop signs. Bryce Harper is one of those guys. He just is postseason sports embodied. Like, he seems like a guy that lives to make the bad boy big time play in a big moment here. He's got all that clutch gene stuff that we love barking about in sports, and we got all that on day one already of the Major League Baseball postseason. So I'm with you guys. Like, I get fired up for this in a way that doesn't fully make sense considering my overall interest in the sport of baseball.
Baseball to me is the most romantic sport. Baseball is, I love it so much. It makes me sad that it's not quite as in the constant sports conversation as maybe it should be. But I'm also a part of that because I'm like you, Mike, these days, unless the Red Sox are really, really good, I'm sort of like, well, I'll tune in a lot in the postseason, but there's nothing like postseason baseball. Like there's just a feeling walking into a ballpark is its own sort of spiritual experience in October. I don't quite know how else to put it. But I am also very excited to start having takes as if I have been an expert this entire time.
That's the thing. We sit down like we've been watching all season. Zach Wheeler goes, into the 7th inning with a shutout, pitching great, you start talking about things that have been going on.
8 or 9 strikeouts is incredible.
And we haven't, right? I mean, even when I was covering baseball in the last couple of decades, it's like there's just so many games. Nobody wants to talk about game 59, so you look for bigger stories in the world of baseball until you zero in on the postseason, and then you jump on it. I've never understood I don't get the romantic part, because I've heard that before, Charlotte. You're not the first to use that. It's romantic. I've never thought of romance in baseball. I don't know why. I mean, and romance is in my head now because of the Golden Bachelor, and I had to sit through that.
You were lucky enough to sit through that.
No, I was forced to sit through that one with my
Charlotte.
wife.
This is his bit every time reality shows come on, where he acts like my mom forces him to do all this, and then inevitably in 2 weeks after a couple more episodes, he's going to be unprompted offering takes to the family group chat because he can't help himself, because this is who he is at his core.
Well, April's out there a little bit. Let's be honest, right? April is out there a little bit.
We'll
get to the Golden Bachelor takes today.
Whatever.
We got plenty in the hopper on that we're looking forward to, Charlotte.
I do think that the romance part for me is probably linked to my childhood. It's probably nostalgia. I was obsessed with baseball. I also think that there is a feeling in a ballpark because of baseball's all about tension, right? Like you're waiting for things are building up. You're waiting for that thing to snap, that big hit, that, final pitch for a no hitter. It's like, are they going to do it? And I think it builds up this sense of like slow anticipation that has gotten faster with the pitch clock, of course, but that I think is really, you're meant to sit there and be there the whole time in a way that I think other sports are very focused on. Like, here's a burst of action, you can go get a drink. Here's a burst of action, and baseball's a little bit more like holistic experience, I guess, is maybe how I would put it.
Yeah, it's like cooking a brisket. You got to kind of do it low and slow for a while. I love making brisket references with sports, but Charlotte, you're absolutely right, and I think that's why postseason baseball hits so different. I remember talking to a play-by-play announcer one time, which, by the way, Sean McDonough, I know, was on the call. I forget for which game yesterday, and has called baseball forever. I am constantly in awe of play-by-play announcers' ability to just weave between sports as multiple seasons cross over. Like, Sean's going to go call one of the best college football games of the weekend in the midst of calling Major League Baseball's playoff. We have guys do it in hockey all the time. It is unbelievable to watch them weave through, especially in baseball, a sport where you listen during the course of a broadcast and there are so many specific stats. I remember Eduardo Perez yesterday talking during the Mariners-Phillies game about how, well, there's only one team in baseball better than the Mariners down 3 after the 7th inning. I'm like, that is such an amazingly specific. First off, shout out to the statistician in the booth for balling outrageous on that one. But it's just those little moments in a sport with so much information where I look at these guys and I'm constantly in awe of their ability to bounce back and forth between all these sports. So it is impressive, but I had a conversation with one of them one time about how it is somewhat difficult in baseball to sell stakes during a regular season where there are so many games, where there is so much input. But now we get to October and it's, hey man, you got 3 games in this wild card round, and then it's kaput and the stadiums are juiced and there's a different energy all around. I mean, I got to watch the little moments that you get in a baseball broadcast, watching all the different people respond and seeing the Philly fanatic in the background, watching earnestly during a Bryce Harper at bat late in that game was just so pure, because he was even lost in the moment inside that giant green suit during what is a very romantic portion of the baseball season, Charlotte. So it's really impressive, Dad.
I enjoyed as well the postseason. Sean McDonough, by the way, calls hockey as well. I mean, you're right. These guys, what they do. And shout out, pulling the curtain back. the statisticians and people in the booth really make us all sound smarter than we really are, especially if you deliver it nice and smoothly, like you knew that stat all along when somebody's holding up a card that has that stat on it and you make yourself look good with it. I'll say this, though, about baseball, and I get it because you guys weren't around when this was going on. And I even caught kind of the tail end of it as well. In all honesty, the best time to kind of get the visual of a baseball game is when it's on radio, when you just kind of sit back and you listen to the play-by-play. And there were some great ones years ago, decades ago, where you just sat there with your eyes closed and they just painted that picture for you. And you could hear, when they called the pitch, you could hear the crack of the bat. So you knew the ball got hit and where was it going to go. That was very, very cool. And obviously it's changed. And like I said, you guys won't know a lot about it. That's really going back, the nostalgia way. But that was a great way to hear a baseball game as well.
That's romantic.
I can say, you just got romance.
You got romance. My dad used to fall asleep with the radio on underneath his pillow to the baseball games until it ran out of battery. Like that's like so pure.
So I'll say pure more than romantic. Maybe
romantic in the sense of nostalgic and of sort of beautiful, and like when you say paint a picture, like that to me is romantic. I'm like, oh,
okay,
yeah,
amazing.
Dad, it sounds like baseball just asked your parents permission to ask you to marry them. Like that was as romantic as it gets right there. Baseball's been whining and dining you your entire life, and you just had no idea. You were oblivious that the love of your life was right there in front of you. It's
baseball
like
just took its glasses off.
Yes, baseball just took its glasses off, undid its hair from the ponytail, and all of a sudden you looked at baseball in a completely different light, and you realized how happy the two of you could be together.
You guys are weird. You guys are really weird. I got nothing else to say, but you guys are weird.
All right. Well, with that in mind, we have a lot that we want to get to here in this hour with Charlotte, including a look at one of her favorite coaches in Bill Belichick and Mike Tomlin, both at a really interesting crossroads, I think, with their teams that we'll get to in a little bit on the NFL front. But while we're talking NFL and romance, Charlotte, I mentioned this briefly yesterday a bit. We've arrived at a very interesting place in the NFL news cycle as it pertains to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, because it's starting to seem like we're just settling in for the long haul on this. All the reporting around it indicates, it's pretty sincere. They're enjoying talking to each other, and this is not the sham or charade that people want. But even, regardless of the sincerity, we're settling in. This has been a storyline for a while and it's been around here, but I've said we've also sort of reached the think piece portion of the news cycle, and it's brought about a bunch of the same problematic tropes that we've seen pop up over the years in different instances. So I wanted to see how you'd been reacting to a lot of the headlines that we've seen start to pop up around this.
Yeah, I was yesterday watching all this stuff come in and watching all these. It's mostly men on sports shows being like, okay, we get it. Welcome new Swifties, but like we've had enough. Like we don't need to keep panning to her. We don't need to keep talking about her. We don't need to keep doing this. And I understand the feeling of ubiquity, of feeling like if you see too much of someone, you're gonna get tired of it. Like that's personally why I don't post that much personal stuff on Instagram, because the more stuff I see from people I know on Instagram just constantly posting about themselves, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to like you less. So I sort of I understand that aspect of it, but first of all, that's not Taylor's fault. She's going to football games, and to me that is all of these people. Like I saw a few different clips of people being like, new Swifties, we're happy to have you, but like, we've got to chill out on all of this. And that to me is not about Taylor Swift. That is about stay in your lane. It's very coded to women. And to me, the thing about sports media that drives me absolutely insane is that there are a lot of men in this space who like to think that it is rocket science and who like to use big words and make it seem much more complicated than it is to keep out people who were not traditionally socialized to need to know this stuff. I get very fired up about this. Like, triple coverage just means it's one guy guarded by three other guys. Like, that's not rocket science. And I think that as these new people come into this space, people who also, first of all, a lot of Swifties already watch football. A lot of Swifties already knew what was going on. You don't have to talk to every Taylor Swift fan as if, oh, she, because it's always a woman when they talk about this, is just discovering football. But I think that there is a gatekeeping aspect of sports media that when guys are saying this stuff, it's really saying, here's my construct of the world in which Taylor Swift and the NFL do not go hand in hand. Those are separate things. And it's threatening to think that maybe her fans who are coming in who weren't traditionally football fans are going to figure out that what we've been doing this whole time is not actually some secret club. It's actually something that is very open to everybody else if you are willing to talk about it in a way that invites people in. So I get very fired up about this. I think everybody needs to just chill out. And if you're annoyed that the broadcast is cutting to her, then you know what? I'm annoyed when the broadcast always cuts to, like, you know, that kicker from 4 years ago who happened to be at the game. Like it really does. To me, it is not about Taylor Swift. It is about men wanting to keep people out of this space. And that drives me absolutely insane.
Listen, I think it's ridiculous as well. I mean, you're not missing a football game. They go into the booth, they shoot Taylor Swift, they talk about her for a little bit, and then you're not missing plays, you're not missing the game. And you're so right about thinking it's this complex, you know, and I even think that too with some analysts out there is like, you try and talk smart to sound smart when it's not, right? Is it difficult? Yes. It's most difficult for the quarterback. Yes. And what they have to do, but trying to throw out coverages and saying this and that. I mean, come on, keep it simple, keep it light, keep it fun. It's a game, and let's move on to this. This isn't some, you know, great bastion of society that we need to keep to ourselves that nobody else is allowed in. It's ridiculous. You're allowed to have some fun. You're allowed to smile a little bit. You're not missing any football. You're getting a little Taylor Swift information. I mean, smile, enjoy it, and move on. Let's not make more out of this than it really is.
No, but and Charlotte's right in that it is like a response when people feel threatened by something new coming in. Like you saw it even within the context of just football yesterday. I saw Kyle Brandt clip go viral where he's bashing the Dolphins offense, thrilled that they got picked apart by the Buffalo Bills in that game because so many people were billing them as the hot new thing. And sometimes there's a reaction when people feel like someone's gone overboard in their praise of a thing and they get to see it fail there when, I mean, in actuality, that line of thinking, we'd still be running ISO formations. We'd still be running under center and fullbacks in the backfield every play if everyone operated that way. And much the same way with this, Charlotte, I always go back to, and I look at now the sports landscape and the way it's covered, the way it's talked about. There's a lot of people that have made the sports viewing experience better, made the conversation better around sports that traditionally would not have been ushered in, right? It used to be just gold jackets and former players ushered in. We didn't have the Mina Kimes of the world, the Pablo Torres of the world, people like you that did not have a background specifically playing the sport that have come in and enriched the conversation, that have provided different vantage points and allow it to be better. Dad always references Bill Curry, you know, former great NFL player, broadcaster, all around phenomenal human being, talks about this idea of the huddle where all of these people from different backgrounds come together for a common goal. And it's like, dog, the most football guy on earth is telling you exactly how this should go with us letting more people into the conversation because it makes it better. And yet for some reason, people can't stomach that when all of a sudden the source of that conversation comes from this vantage point of one of the biggest pop stars on earth.
And I also think that you're totally right, Mike. There's also in sports media with all the Taylor Swift thing, there is a little bit of like, act like you've been there before, like, you know, announcers being like, oh, here's my blank space reference. And it's like, okay, well, I think we're past that point. I also think sports is, anybody here who's like, oh, this is just celebrity gossip, like this is taken away from the game. Sports is celebrity gossip. Yes! We are gossiping about celebrities who play a game. Sports, I think for a lot of men, it is a way to an emotional safe space to feel things and to gossip about stuff and feel connected to other people by talking about other people. And that's the same thing as Taylor Swift. So everybody's got to realize that these are actually like hand in hand, pretty close to the same thing. You don't have to prove anything by saying you don't like it.
You don't have to prove anything to us. Welcome, Swifties and football fans alike. Let's talk Tomlin, Belichick next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield, Charlotte Wilder. It's a quad box sighting here on a Wednesday morning. And guys, there's something that I was actually waiting until we had Charlotte on to talk about this week, because I wanted to get near and dear to her heart with the New England Patriots, because we got problems right now. And really, we've got problems for two of the best coaches in my lifetime, the most dependable figures in Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Bill Belichick. As we currently look at these teams right now, the Steelers 2-2, so not falling off a cliff by any means in this NFL season, and the Patriots sitting 1-3, both seem to kind of have a little bit of existential dread around their programs. For the Steelers, it's more predicated on the offense. It's this decision about Matt Canada, the future of that team. Kenny Pickett dinged up after this last weekend. You lose in embarrassing fashion to the Houston Texans this weekend in a way that's sort of making you reevaluate everything. And on the other side, it's a similar situation for the New England Patriots, Charlotte. Bill Belichick suffers his worst loss ever this past weekend as the New England Patriots head coach. And Mac Jones looks listless. The offense doesn't seem to have found its way back to form like people hoped this year. And now I think it's got some people wondering about how long we continue to do this with one of the best coaches of all time. I don't know if that's hyperbolic. I don't know if among Patriots fans it's a similar conversation or not, Charlotte, but that feels like where we're heading.
I could not believe what I was seeing. I was like, oh, so this is what the rest of the NFL has felt for 20 years. Like, being an NFL fan isn't fun. Like, I thought it was fun for 20 years. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I get to watch the greatest quarterback of all time just sling the pigskin down the field and then we win. That is not the experience, I'm learning. Shout out Lions fans. You guys are amazing. I think which is turning around, which is so exciting. Yeah. But I think watching this, I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do about Bill? Like, what do you do about Bill? And I started imagining the conversation between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick and being like, so thank you for your service. But we are, because at this point, what has he done? What has he done since Brady left? And I know I sound like a parody of Boston sports radio, but honestly, the coolest thing we've seen from the Patriots is a blocked punt against the Dolphins. That is the coolest thing we have gotten all season. And at this point, and it's all Bill Barnwell over at ESPN, dear friend, love this guy, very smart, wrote about the Patriots that with Bill O'Brien, captaining the offense, manning the ship, being the offensive coordinator, it's almost worse with Mac Jones, because last year you could blame it on Matt Patricia and Joe Judge and whatever that hodgepodge of coaching situation was. But now it's like, oh, you have someone who not only has worked with Mac Jones before, but who is very good at his job, and it's still not working. So I think ultimately it's on the head coach. And what are we seeing from Belichick?
Well, I think a couple of things. We've had the GOAT play, and you're right. You guys would see a season, Boston fans, in whatever sport it was, and then you'd have a parade, and everything was great. It was just how it should be. You guys weren't the normal fan, that's for sure. You got way more parades than other places were getting. So there's a couple things here. You had Tom Brady, which could be the fixer of all. And then you have Mac Jones, who unfortunately is not. And unfortunately, I don't think is going to be the future quarterback of the Patriots. So right there, you knew the next quarterback wasn't going to be as good anyway. And then it was a matter of finding the next one, and they have not. As far as Bill in the end, I mean, let's also be honest. There are coaches both in the pros and college, and very few of them, they're going to call their shot. Bill Belichick's not getting fired. Bill Belichick is going to leave when Bill Belichick wants to leave. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be a discussion with he and Robert Kraft about what's going forward and how we're going to be going forward and what we're going to do, and do they mutually agree upon something. But this isn't going to be, I don't believe, a firing. This would eventually, if maybe they came to a conclusion that Bill would want to step down or step away. But if he wants to keep coaching, in my opinion, I think he'll keep coaching. I don't think he'll be asked to step away from the Patriots, and they're going to have to try it with a different quarterback. I think that's where this team is headed. Unless Bill doesn't want to coach anymore, I think the next step is, what's the next quarterback for the Patriots?
Yeah, a few weeks ago on the Levitard show, our dear friend Mina Kimes, I asked her, I was like, how should I feel as a Patriots fan? And she was like, well, I don't think there's any other coach you would want coaching this team. Like, there's no one who's going to do a better job with the roster they've got. She was like, you can take real issue with Bill, the GM, though. Like, maybe it's time to separate those two roles. I don't want Belichick fired. I don't think there's anyone who's going to do a better job overall managing a team. I mean, for all we talk about, like, since Brady left, blah, 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 like, Bill did that too. As a GM, though, this strategy of, finding white lacrosse players is not working anymore. So
yeah, that's a lot easier to do when you've got the greatest quarterback of all time. And you look at his recent draft history in the years since Tom Brady, it hasn't gotten any better in terms of the offensive production that they've been able to bring into the building. They've traditionally had a problem hitting on highly drafted receivers and skill players. Even the offseason spending spree that they had a couple of years ago post Brady didn't really bear the kind of fruit you were thinking. You've got one 2021 wild card loss to show for all of your wares in the last few years. I'm with you. He's not going to get fired, and he shouldn't get fired. But I do wonder how long Bill's going to want to do this.
Yeah.
Like whatever this version of the Patriots dynasty, when you've been eating caviar for so long, he is still deserving of so much of the credit for what went on during those 20 years. The revisionist history that's going to go on as this thing gets uglier is going to be misguided because you just don't get everything that happened there without the control that he's able to maintain on that organization for so long. I was always in the camp of let's give more credit to Brady because he's the player on the field, because he's the guy actually doing things, and that's how this sport works. But that doesn't mean we need to rob it from Bill on the other side. The Tomlin situation isn't that far of a cry from this either, guys. Now, he's at a place where there's been more Popes than Steelers coaches in the last few years, so we know they're not going to fire him here.
Right.
And I think in both cases, they've got easy outs. The Patriots are going to move on from Mac Jones after this year if things keep up this way. They got the decision to make about his fifth-year option in the spring, and at this rate, it's going to be a pretty easy one, even if it's not all his fault, even if Bill has to wear the fact that he undermined Mac Jones' development with the decisions he made at offensive coordinator last year, and to some extent this year. It might be on Mac Jones's fault that there was never going to be much development beyond that rookie year, but either way, that's going to be the easiest course of action. And for Mike Tomlin, while he's come out and publicly backed Matt Canada so far this season, said this week amidst calling for changes on the roster that they weren't going to make a change at offensive coordinator at this juncture, Dad, that's the easy place for him to cut off the arm to save the rest of the body if this thing continues to go south for the Steelers this season.
Well, and you mentioned it there where I was going to go. You have two guys in Tomlin and Belichick that can basically call their shots. So the people that are going to be out are those that are leading on offense on the field, and that's Mac Jones, and then leading on offense on the sidelines, and that's Matt Canada for sure. I called that the Steeler-Raider game a week ago, and the stats on the Matt Canada era, he got there as a quarterback coach in 19, I believe, and then became the coordinator a year later. Since he's been the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, they're 26th in points scored, 31st in yards per play, 30th in passing yards per attempt, and they're the only team during his tenure that has not had a 400-yard offensive output in a game. So it is awful. The offense is awful. And do you throw everything on Canada? No, but you look for places to make changes. And it's not going to be Kenny Pickett right now. It looks like he may try and play this week. Then they have a bye, could have 14 days after that. So where do you make that changes? And I don't have any doubt, at least I don't think, that Matt Canada by the end of this year, maybe by the midpoint, is not going to be calling plays for this team anymore.
Guys, Matt Canada. It's too good of a name for a guy to blame everything on. Matt Canada? Like, are you kidding? That's like someone made that in a lab to be like, it was his fault. I can't explain it. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else, but blaming something on Matt Canada, it's like, yes, there you go. You're welcome. Am I wrong?
No, Matt Canada sounds like the fake name that you leave at the desk at a hotel when you're a celebrity wanting to check in anonymously.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, can I get 2 room keys from Matt Canada? That's 100% who that is.
And he was the next guy, right? He was the star in college. He was bopping from colleges. He ended up getting it was at Maryland. Then there was the interim head coach there for a bit. So he was this hot young coordinator coming into the NFL, and it just flat out hasn't worked out.
It's proof that not all motion is good motion. Like that was Matt Canada's thing in college. It was shifted. There's a lot of jet motion here. And it's like, that only works if there's a purpose behind it. It really hasn't seemed like there's as much purpose behind that. But speaking of motion with purpose, coming up next, let's get to a couple of guys that are trying to push the envelope on what the NFL MVP is allowed to be.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's take a look at DK's MVP odds here for non-quarterbacks. Okay, as you can see, Christian McCaffrey is leading the way here. He's at plus 2,000. Then you got Micah Parsons, plus 5,000. Oh, it's starting to get a little steep here as we head over to Tyreek Hill at plus 7,500. Justin Jefferson sitting there at plus 7,500 as well. And then rounding out our top 5 here, Myles Garrett at plus 10,000. Guys, the last non-quarterback to win the award was Vikings running back Adrian Peterson all the way back in 2012. So what do we think? Does CMC have a chance here?
You know what's wild is, while in some ways that is an eternity ago and makes me feel absolutely decrepit, it also wasn't that long ago that we're talking about it. Now, 2012, you could say, was on the line of demarcation where we still had a league that wasn't as driven by the quarterback at that point as it is now. We hadn't made the full switch to the spread offenses that have put them at the center of the world and all this drop back heavy league. It hadn't become a nickel passing league, I think, just yet back in 2012. But even now, Dad, it feels like such a far cry from that point. And it feels like we've kind of silently agreed to silo off like the, you know, offensive player of the year and defensive player of the year as the places where we acknowledge the others in here, and the MVP has just become completely and totally a quarterback for reasons, quite frankly, that I understand. Like, I don't know if you have a problem with this. Well, I really don't, because I understand the math problem that's at play here.
I've had a problem with it, but I just kind of do it for show now because I get it. I mean, it's a passing league right now, so I understand the quarterback's the most important position. You know, I have an issue with the Heisman Trophy as well. It always going to a quarterback. I mean, my God, people start looking, if you haven't already, Brock Bowers, the kid from Georgia, could easily be the best player in all of college football, but that's a discussion for another day. I just think this is where the league is now. It's a quarterback league. Quarterbacks are even more athletic now. They're running so well as far as passing as well. So I'm with you. The offset is the offensive and defensive player of the year, where you kind of have that competition for all the others. So while I will continue to complain about it because it's supposed to be a league-wide award, it is become specifically, or 99% of the time, a quarterback award. So while I understand it, doesn't mean I really like it, quite honestly, because I think there are other incredible players out there. But the fact is, the quarterback does touch the ball every play and have a say basically in every play on the field. So begrudgingly, I understand it more today than other years.
I think this year especially is interesting because there's not a quarterback where you're like, oh my God, that guy is really just lighting it up the way you would for Christian McCaffrey, who had 4 touchdowns last week against the Cardinals, who caught for 1, ran for 3. He had 106 yards rushing. Watching him play, there was a moment where he hurdled one of the Cardinals defenders, like straight up, just like was running, did a hurdle like he was in a track meet, and then I believe scored a touchdown off of that play, or if not, got very close and then scored a touchdown. And it's like otherworldly stuff. And a few years ago, we saw this from Derrick Henry when he had his 2,000 rushing yard season, and I was like, give it to Henry. Like, let's see. You know, I mean, the running back situation and the market for running backs and what they're paid makes me so mad because right now they are carrying so many of these teams. I mean, the Giants without Saquon, Daniel Jones is their best running back right now. Like they rely on these guys so much, and then it just is not shown in the contracts. But I would love to see it go to a running back if someone like Christian McCaffrey continues this kind of season.
Well, I was going to say, Mike, I wonder too, isn't it your definition of MVP? Now, a lot of times that you're looking, is it a player who led their team? Because it's a regular season award, but do you need your lead your team to the playoffs and be one of the better teams in the NFL? You know, or a guy like Puka Nacua. He could literally break the record for receptions in a year held by Michael Thomas and yards in a year held by Kelvin Johnson. But if they don't make the playoffs, he could get offensive player of the year, but he wouldn't get MVP of the year. So
my problem with that is the conversation of value to each team.
Right.
Like I would look at that Rams offense and still say a healthy Matthew Stafford is worth more to you on that offense than what Puka Nacua has done. Puka's been incredible, but what a healthy Matthew Stafford affords you in that offense is more valuable. That's why Christian McCaffrey, especially for all of us at this point, because the sample size with Brock Purdy is so small, we're not willing to anoint him the sole driver of that offense. We look at Christian and say that. The same is true for an extent in Miami with Tua because of Tyreek Hill. I would put him firmly in this conversation. If we're going to give out a non-quarterback MVP at this juncture of the season, I would always point to Tyreek Hill. And this is a conversation I heard Dominique Foxworth have a lot last year. What he affords you with his skill set in that offense is the reason it's allowed to be different than the other iterations of the Shanahan-McVay tree, because you've got a guy who's the most unique mover in the NFL at the helm of that offense. And yeah, he's not a quarterback, but what he does for the rest of that team is the kind of effect that you would expect from an MVP, to Charlotte's point about Derrick Henry, who absolutely is that going away for that Tennessee Titans team right now.
Yeah, I think that there is so many, the idea of MVP in general is so complicated, because it's like looking at this league full of the greatest people. It is so hard to get to the NFL. It is so hard to play professional football, and then to be like, okay, who of these freak specimens of athletic ability is the one who is most valuable to the team? And that's so subjective too. Just, in talking here, what does most valuable mean? Does it mean like you're on a bad team and you save them from being worse? Does it mean that it's not clear? And I think what it's come to mean is like the greatest player on the field, but that could be so many different guys week to week.
Well, to that point, JJ Watt, I thought, offered an interesting portion of this, because the Texans, in the lead up to JJ Watt going in the Ring of Honor, put out his stats from 2014 with the caption JJ Watt should have been the MVP in 2014, and showed all the different accolades. He had 5 touchdowns, 20.5 sacks, 78 tackles, 5 forced fumbles, all pro at 2 different positions. And JJ Watt quote tweeted, and he said, the honest truth is that it's physically impossible for any one player to be more valuable than the quarterback. They touch the ball every single play. A quarterback should win the MVP always. Best player and MVP are often, but not always, the same. Aaron was very deserving, pointing to that season. So JJ Watt saying the part of this that's become difficult to ignore, which is they've got an outsized influence on every portion of the game. Jed, I always give you grief for defensive linemen. You make 2 plays behind the line of scrimmage a game, and you're on a Hall of Fame trajectory at that position. If you're a quarterback and you screw up 2 plays in the game, you're getting talked about on First Take Monday for your job being on the line. The positions are just so wildly different for all of these across the board that it does make it really hard to look away from the shiny thing with the golden arm in the middle of it.
So let me ask you both this. Charlotte, you can start if you like. Who's the best player in the NFL?
Patrick Mahomes.
Boy, Charlotte, your voice got deep.
Well, because
I thought you said both of us. Sorry.
Oh, you did.
I did, but then I said Charlotte go first, but that's okay.
Well, if we're going off of last week alone, Zach Wilson, is he the best player?
Oh my God, no, he's the prisoner of the moment.
He was the only person to have better stats than Patrick Mahomes in a game that Patrick Mahomes started in college or the NFL.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's
amazing,
hilarious.
Oh my God,
that is so. I know, which is also like maybe you just need a Taylor Swift-sized chip on your shoulder every week. Just kidding. I think Patrick Mahomes. I think, though, that there are guys who are not in as good of a situation as Patrick Mahomes with Andy Reid. Like, reflexively, I want to say Joe Burrow, because I so badly want that to work out, and I'm so mad at the Bengals. But, yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes. Mike.
Yeah, there's part of me that leans either Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson on this. But it is hard to go away from Patrick Mahomes and what he does. So those would be the 3 I would have. And I guess if you push me up against the wall to decide, I would probably, just because of all the things he does, Mahomes is probably going to still be that guy.
That's the other part of this, is it is tough to overcome inertia in any field, but especially in the NFL when you've got a guy that's banked that many winnable moments and that many wonderful in the postseason too. He still got this thing. He did it in the postseason, and then he went and green mushroomed everybody else in the NFL by stamping his legacy indelibly on all of our little peanut brains and making me so afraid to pick against them ever again like I did last year because I'm an idiot. Coming up next, let's look at the most miserable MVP in sports. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Charlotte Wilder, and Jesse Cofield. We will get to our look back at week one of the Golden Bachelor. We've got night 2 coming up on Thursday in a little segment we like to call Reality Check, the perfect place to end our first hour of the show and to end a Wilder Wednesday. But before we get to that, guys, I need to play you the most compelling bit of video footage from NBA Media Days. We've got so much going on right now. The Dame Lillard trade, James Harden apparently getting ready to come to camp and make it real awkward for the 76ers. But there is no greater reminder of who this league belongs to than this soundbite from Nikola Jokic yesterday, who came back and was asked about if this was the most enjoyable offseason that he had in his NBA career.
This past summer, the most fun you've had since you've been in the NBA?
No, I think it's actually opposite.
Why?
Because we played 2.5 extra months and recovered and everything, so it was good. But I had fun. Summers that I had more fun.
No, because I had to play 2.5 extra months of basketball, win the championship that had been the only thing missing from my resume, enjoy the fantastic parade. There has never been anyone, I think, more relatable to 99% of the human population than Nikola Jokic, who literally looks at it. And I think it was Dragonfly Jones who said, we hear ball is life all the time. No. Ball is work for Nikola Jokic. Period. End of sentence.
I would like to point out that he made it a point to say actually that it was actually the opposite, They're like, was this the best summer that you've had? And he was like, actually the opposite. Like, it's the worst summer he's had.
This guy begrudgingly made $47 million on the basketball court last year and did not enjoy it. And I mean, it's unbelievable for those that bust their humps to be out there and play and be a pro and just have a guy just absolutely smoke you, who really would rather not be there, would rather be hanging out with his family and his horses in Serbia. Yeah, I'll be here. I'll take your 47 mil. I'll win the trophy. But man, I'm not enjoying this at all.
See, I don't know that I fully buy it. I think this might be a situation where it's one of those things that you can say because you have the thing you want most. I think it's very easy to be like, oh man, I wish I had like a little more time off, or like I wish I could race my horses a little bit more, because he won the NBA trophy. He won the Larry O'Brien. He is an he said in this press conference also that what he loves about their team is that they built it from the ground up, that a lot of those guys that they drafted, homegrown, developed, are still there. He was like, that's how it should be. And he was like, we were building for a long time, 4 or 5 years. We're finally here. That to me betrays a little bit of like, you do want this. You do want this. And I think that, yes, it is very relatable, but I also don't think you get to the point that Nikola Jokic is by actually not caring.
I think that Nikola Jokic is one of the most important figures in North American sports right now, because I do choose to believe, and maybe it's me suspending reality a bit, because there's probably some kernel of truth there. He's had to care enough to get in the gym to get to the point he's at right now, but he doesn't care all that much. It's total reverse Mamba mentality. And I think it's important, kids, to learn this valuable lesson now. You need to be here for the right reasons. You need to be motivated intrinsically in the world of sports to work hard and do your thing and accomplish what you can do with the best of your physical ability, because eventually you're going to run into one of those. Everybody in their sports lifetime is going to run into a player that is so naturally gifted, that is so great at what they do, and does not like the sport. Dad, you and I both know I played football with plenty of guys that didn't actually like playing football, but they were so good they were going to change their families' lives with that, because they walked out of the hospital with more, and they're just balling like that. And you have to have everyone has that sobering moment where it's like, oh my God, my better is not even anywhere close to better enough to best a guy who doesn't even want to be here right now. This could be the most important thing in the world to you, and it's not going to matter. So kids, learn that lesson now, because eventually we all run into that boogeyman, and his name in this case is Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, especially at that level, when you're all playing at the top level and he can still deal on you, because even at the top level, there are different levels, and he's on that different level. And it's just got to make people shake their head a little bit. Whether it's a little bit of a game like Charlotte says, I still think it's more on the side of this dude is just playing because these are his God-given talents, man. So he's going to make the most of it and put himself in a great position to go race his horses.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think he doesn't mean what he's saying. I think he does mean what he's saying, but I think that there is another side of him that maybe he is less in touch with or less vocal about, but that exists to have gotten him to the point that he's at. And I do think he cares a lot about his teammates.
Yes.
And I think that that is where you start to be like, okay, but you care enough. Like, you weren't going to leave them in the lurch. You weren't going to throw a game so you could get back to your horses because you love Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray too much.
But now that he's got the Larry O'Brien, maybe that's on the table. And that's a very exciting prospect going into this season. We will get more into plenty of that. You can get plenty more of that with Oddball, Charlotte Wilder, Amin El Hassan, every day besides Monday, giving you that NBA goodness going into the start of the season here. But guys, speaking of goodness, I don't know if you heard, the Golden Bachelor premiered last Thursday to a 3-year high for the franchise. September 28th, premiere rose to 7.7 million viewers after 3 days of cross-platform viewing, a gain of 3.34 million viewers. The episode did numbers because everyone was ready for a little bit of change, and we got that in the form of a bunch of oldies going after here.
Easy.
Our Golden Bachelor, Gary, married for 43 years to his high school sweetheart, who he unfortunately lost tragically to illness, as documented at the beginning of this. I don't know about you guys, the scene, and it was very quick, of his daughters telling him they want him to go on, this won't replace mom, it got me in the waterworks in like the first 10 minutes of the show. It punched me right in the mouth, Charlotte.
Mike, I was crying literally 2 minutes in. My husband looked at me and was like, wait, are you are you already crying? And I was like, no, yes, I just like and then Gary starts crying and I was just like full on crying. I think this is the smartest thing ABC has ever done. I also think that all reality shows should have older people on them. They know who they are. They know what they want. They are unapologetic. They're wacky in fun ways. Also, though, I'm really worried about these people. I don't want to see these ladies go through the drama. I don't want to see Gary crying and saying this is the second worst moment of my life after my wife died, as the previews have shown.
Which, by the way, that went a little bit too far. If I was one of his kids, I'd be kind of pissed about that.
That was a little much.
Dad, listen, relax.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am intrigued for the drama. I also think it's going to be a lot harder to watch than the other dramas.
The best part about it, though, to that end is it's only an hour long, which is an incredible change up in this franchise and much needed. Dad.
I do like that because I would have been Kimmel's aunt who fell asleep, and I'm sure I know it was all staged and all that, but that would have been me. I would have fallen asleep. That's too much for me. My biggest question is his name is spelled Gerry. Why is he called Gary?
Because he's from.
Where
is he from? Iowa.
Yeah, that one I didn't understand.
Iowa.
But I will say, as I watched it, I did pick the first impression rose. Your mother asked me who was going. I said it's going to go to the lady who came in on a motorcycle, because I don't remember their names, and that would be my biggest issue. Is I don't remember any of their names. So
that would be Faith.
You would have in common with Jesse Palmer, the host, who, by the way, has been excellent. Having Jesse be the host is like having a former player. It's like D'Amico Ryans going to the Texans, having a former player in that chair, a guy who understands what Gary's been through. But you can even tell the experience is different for him. But yes, that was Faith, who, by the way, we need to root for. If you're looking for people to root for there, I really like Teresa, really big fan of Edith. And what we had in the first impression rose was great with Faith. Local radio host was her bio there. So I feel like for those of us in sports media, we need to go ahead and root for one of our own, even though she did the cringy thing and busted out the guitar on the first night, which is usually a big no-no. Because there's no way to be serenaded nice.
I'm going to find her local radio clips, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to find out if this is real, if she's actually a local radio host. And I'm going to report back on what I find.
That's good. We will need to know that. How about the lady who said she dated Prince? I mean, we have no idea if that's true or not. But she sure threw that one in there, right? She couldn't wait to get that one in there.
Yeah, I don't believe her necessarily on that. Didn't she say Prince wrote a song about her? She was the dance instructor, whose name is escaping me at the moment, but. Leslie, the dance instructor.
Sorry, I'm so good at this. I'm so good at this.
That's why we've got you on for this wonderful segment called Reality Check each and every Wednesday, where we'll be following along with the Golden Bachelor all season long this year. So strap in, folks, for an experience unlike any other. Everyone check out Oddball, Charlotte Wilder, and Amin El Hassan. Charlotte, we love you, bud. Thank you so much. Coming up next, let's get some more NFL talk. Why not? Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. Our thanks to our good bud Charlotte Wilder for holding it down with us on a Wilder Wednesday. Coming up in about 20 minutes, Ryan Fitzpatrick, former NFL quarterback and current member of the Amazon Prime Thursday night pregame show, going to join us to look ahead at that as we've got the Bears and the Commies squaring off here, Dad. We'll see if Ryan can make some sense of what's gone on with the Chicago Bears at this point and the bad vibes around that organization.
I think the one thing he can definitely talk about is what it feels like to get sacked, since these are the two of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league, and Ryan Fitzpatrick took his share of sacks as well. So that certainly could be part of the conversation.
Man, you're going to try and make it as awkward for Ryan as Jared Goff did. Did you see that the other night after that Thursday night performance by the Detroit Lions? Jared Goff gets up. Do we have that video, guys, of Jared Goff getting up and making it very awkward for Ryan Fitzpatrick on set? We don't have that video for it, but after this, apparently, I don't know what Fitzpatrick's original comments are. He called Jared Goff a poor man's somebody, and Jared Goff threw it right back in his face after. Said, I didn't realize I was a poor man's anybody here based on that. I like, Dad, the Detroit Lions version of Jared Goff got a little something to him right now. Dan Campbell's rubbed off on that guy.
A little more feisty since going back when he was with the Rams and he didn't know what side the sun came up on, you know, in that whole conversation from Hard Knocks and stuff. He has gotten a little feisty, and Fitzpatrick said he played like the poor man's Matt Ryan. That's the term he used, and Goff kind of playfully threw it back at him. And it's always something you run into when you're a current player, then a former player and an analyst, when you start breaking tape down, film down, and you're being negative towards someone's play and they call you on it, or I had more than a few people when I started.
I was going to say, do you have someone that comes to mind for you?
I don't know the specific one, but what would happen is before it's NFL Live now, it used to be NFL Tonight. When we started that show, myself, Mark Malone, Merrill Hodge, and Sean Salisbury, and we would break down tape. And again, it's always about the play, not about the person. I would break down tape, this, that, you know, this is what should have happened. This didn't happen. This person did this. And then when I would go out and be on the road at games, you would get a player that would come up to me and say, he either heard me say, or his brother's friend's girlfriend, you know, they said you said something about me. I'm like, well, if they did, this is what I said. You know, if you wanted to dispute it or talk about, that's cool. I had no problem with that. It's not like it got confrontational. I just said, this is what I said. Some players, you know, didn't like that when you start breaking it down. And I made sure I always did it in a football way, not a personal way. It's not my job to tell me what kind of person he is, but what the play is on the field. So players can get sensitive about that. And that's one of the biggest lines, you went through it as well, that you have to cross over is, I have to be negative towards some players and their play on the field. How do I feel about that? Because I used to be peers with them. Now I'm in a different role than they are.
Well, and for me, it was always that fine line because I wasn't peers with them. I didn't have a long NFL career. So now I'm going to criticize guys that are all objectively better at what they're doing in the job we were asked to do than I was. And it's the focus you always mentioned of focusing on the play and not the player, focusing on what happened and not being personal. Although we see now more than ever, Dad, in the media, with players, so many of them having platforms in the media, so many of them having podcasts, but just in general being online, more willing to clap back when people do, in their estimation, step over the line. You had that moment with Rodney Harrison on Football Night in America talking to Chandler Jones after the Jets game, where he said Zach, you know, was talking about.
No, that was Chris Jones. Chris
Jones. With Chris Jones thereafter talking about what had gone on with the Jets quarterback in Zach Wilson.
Right.
And at one point referred to him and said, you didn't watch on tape and be like, that guy's garbage. And you saw a number of NFL players, including some of Zach Wilson's teammates, come to his defense. Chris Jones even managed to sidestep that and say, no, you look on tape and you see some special things from this guy. And I think you see, because of that, people, and I always say this, it's easy in this job to kind of get further removed from the field if you're not around there, if you're not in the locker rooms, if you're not talking to players all the time, to kind of feel far enough removed to say some pretty wild stuff. And I think players now do a better job of checking guys when they cross the line, because I think at that moment, calling someone garbage there is crossing the line a bit, is making it way too personal. And so you kind of have a good system of accountability now that didn't always exist outside of some of those in-person interactions before.
And I'm glad we do. In fact, the term I believe was hot garbage. And I couldn't believe Rodney said that. I thought that was way out of line. And I thought Chris Jones handled it incredibly well. You can break down a player without doing that. I mean, you can, that's what we do as former players. We can break down the game so we can
But I will
show.
say, Dad, too, that's also a peek into how players talk about guys like a Zach Wilson inside locker rooms, because you know good and damn well, you guys probably on that Eagles defense said some wild stuff about some quarterbacks inside your locker room. And so it's this double-edged sword of you're getting a peek at how guys actually think about other players on other teams when you get some of this. But also we all kind of universally understand, especially for guys in that former player fraternity, that when you talk like that about someone, it's that old line, I can say that about my sibling, but if one of you from the outside says that, it's going to be a problem here. It's kind of that same feel amongst that fraternity where you know how difficult this job is. And so when you say stuff like that and invite the average person then and give them the clearance because you said it to join in that chorus, you're intentionally making life more difficult for a guy whose experience you should know better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you're absolutely right about the platform. Players who have podcasts, and forget even that, just a player can clap back just in a tweet or on however they choose to off of what another former player said about them. So you can get where I would have to wait till I was out and I saw somebody somewhere and they brought it up. Now, you know, just like shows, you can get instant feedback all the time. And you get it more and more from players, especially if the players feel that analyst was wrong. Listen, a lot of times the analyst is right because, by the way, nobody plays the perfect game. Okay, everybody makes mistakes in a game, and that's our job, is to point out the good and then point out the bad. And you want to be right, because every single play, Mike, when you and I call games, it's not like we absolutely positively know the coverage or the gap responsibility of every player at all times. So you're trying to piece it together and give the best thought process you can of what you thought may have happened. And quite honestly, if you're not sure it was that guy's fault, then you don't say it was that guy's fault. You can hedge somehow, some way, and another way of explaining it. But there are times you have to really make sure you know of what you're talking about if you're going to lay specific blame on somebody.
Speaking of blame, Dad, let's try and divvy it up among the Giants here. Because we saw this past weekend was a disaster for the Giants that we know. And while there are a bunch of things you can focus on there, you had another team try and fail to recreate the tush push, the brotherly shove, and actually have multiple players injured on that play for the Giants, including their center, John Michael Schmitz, promising rookie out of Minnesota. It's a reminder that the notion of banning that play was always a silly, ridiculous notion that the Eagles have a power lifter at quarterback and a bunch of freak shows playing offensive line. So understandably very good at this. But Dad, the image that everyone was left with at that game was Brian Daboll throwing the tablet in disgust on the sideline, Daniel Jones walking past him after the pick six that he threw in that game. How concerned are you by displays like that on the sideline, especially when it is a head coach on a struggling team and the quarterback that you've recently invested in?
Just like players, and I don't put anything into players going at it with either each other or a coach on the sideline of a game, because that is the middle of the game. That's why a lot of times NASCAR interviews are the best, because they're in the moment, right? And you may see a fight or something, that anything that's in the moment. And the frustration level, listen, frustration isn't just left for players, okay? That's for coaches as well. And the frustration level at that point for Brian Daboll, it just looked like disgust. I mean, that was on the pick six. You look at that play, you look at the route, you look at the three possibilities Daniel Jones had, and he threw to absolutely the worst case scenario he could have. And that was one of the few plays where he wasn't immediately pressured. He actually had time and chose the worst of the three routes that were out there, and it went the other way for 97 yards. And I think Daboll was just at that point was like, dude, are you kidding me? We have a chance to get within one score here. You have three out on a route, and you throw to the worst one possible and just flips his the iPad, and it was just disgusting. No, I don't put a whole lot to those things when they happen on game day like that.
The thing I do question, though, because there was enough bad in this game to go around for the Giants that everybody kind of gets to wear some. And I saw, Dan Orlovsky did a great breakdown looking at one of the protections and a couple of the sacks that were on Daniel Jones, where he saw the pre-snap look and did not make the right call. I think the common misconception so often with sacks allowed, and I think we've gotten better at explaining this with certain stats, between pressure percentage versus sack percentage, and ways that we can show the value of a quarterback in keeping sacks from happening, and how different guys are better than that than others, and how running backs factor in other parts of the protection plan. And so Dan did a good job of showing when the quarterback was at fault for some of these. But Dad, late in that game, when they were drowning right now, and it felt like every other play for the Giants was either a penalty or sack, I was a little amazed at how often in that game it was, hey, I understand we're behind and we got to get up, but we're just dropping back without any extra help for an offensive line that was struggling at that point, for a quarterback that just wasn't seeing the rush. It almost seemed like Brian Daboll was trying to prove a point in that moment out of frustration at that point in the game, because they were just not flat out protecting their quarterback in a way I thought they needed to at that juncture.
That I never understand, Mike, is adjusting. There was a game a year or two ago, and I for the life of me can't remember it. All I remember is it was a backup left tackle in, and he just kept getting beat over and over and over again. And not once did they put a tight end next to him. Not once did they chip with the back. And basically they said, this is our offense. I thought, how ridiculous is that? If you don't adjust A, to your players, and B, to the situation that's going on in the game, I don't know what you're doing. For you just to say, this is how we run it, the players have to execute it, and you're getting your ass beat. Well, you know what? You better look in the mirror too and say, we need to adjust somehow, some way. Why is our quarterback getting his butt kicked back there? And what can we do to help that? Listen, I know the left tackle or the right guard or the left guard is supposed to be able to block that guy one-on-one or pass off a twist. We all know what you're supposed to do, because it's amazing in walkthrough, the play works 100% of the time, every time, right? But it doesn't work that way in a real game. So if it's not happening and mistakes are being made, you damn well better adjust instead of just saying, do it better out there. Would you like them to do it better? Yes. But when you're getting beat time and time again, you have to adjust and find a different way to approach something. And you're right. They just left him out there and hung him out to dry. So when you get beat this bad and when you're playing as bad as you are, it ain't just one person that has to look in the mirror. It's a lot of people that have to look in the mirror on how they're doing their job, how they're preparing, how they're playing, and how they're coaching.
Yep. And I understand so much of this goes back to, hey, you're just too banged up to function up front right now. Your fourth different offensive line combination, and you had multiple guys go down in this game. But we saw the Seahawks weather a pretty similar storm this weekend and that kind of injury. And because of the plan that you had, Shane Waldron and company there, you were able to overcome that stuff. For the Giants right now, they're at a bit of a crossroads between who they want to be and who they are right now. And I think that was always the tough bit with Daniel Jones coming into the season, is that investment was about a guy who they believe could take that next step as a quarterback. And we saw some of, unfortunately, the familiar problems that had popped up early in Daniel's career with ball security and the like that became and reared their ugly heads in this game. You can still argue they maybe didn't go out and acquire enough this offseason to help Daniel Jones take that next step outside of a guy like Darren Waller. But regardless, he's got to take a big step forward, and this team's got to take a big look in the mirror, because defensively, that unit has not shown up in that way. And offensively, Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka, two of the coaches that we lauded last year for their ability to maximize personnel, so far this year, I think are struggling just as much as their quarterback in that regard.
So tell me this, Mike, because it's the offensive side of the ball. On a short yardage play, it's very, very simple of what O linemen and D linemen do, okay? As an interior defensive lineman, especially fourth and really short or third and really short, whatever, goal line play is you get down low and you try and shoot a gap and get under the legs of the O lineman and at least make the line of scrimmage stay there so they get no movement. An offensive lineman, you're still trying to move a defensive lineman or create some kind of space for your quarterback or the running back. That is not rocket science. What the Eagles are doing is not rocket science. They are lining up two guys behind Jalen Hurts, and they are pushing him, the brotherly shove. And it's working this season 10 of 11 times. Anybody else who has tried it, they're 49 of 71, 68%. Why doesn't it work for other teams, and why does it work in the same basic play of what O linemen are trying to do, the quarterback getting pushed? And I know Jalen Hurts squats the mountain, but he's still getting pushed by two players. You're still being helped by players.
I maintain he'd still get it without the push. I want them to go out and prove a point this week and just do it without the push, because I do think having a quarterback who's a power lifter matters. And why would we be surprised? The Eagles' offensive line is universally considered one of the best in the NFL, that they would also be better at this than most lines in the NFL. Like, they're better at pass blocking and run blocking in normal downs and distances than most groups. So why wouldn't they be better at this part of it too? You got a center who's basically as low to the ground as possible. Jason Kelce, a little bit on the shorter side, definitely one of the more athletic guys, gets lower than most people. Landon Dickerson's a big old hoss. They got a front full of big old hosses there. So their guys are bigger and better than most of the rest of parts of offensive line play than everybody else. So I'm not surprised. And again, when you factor in the Jalen Hurts part, which I do think matters, like anyone on any team can do the shove from behind. Why is it that this quarterback in particular seems so adept at going out and doing that? I do think it's because you got basically a linebacker playing quarterback in terms of the strength measurables.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how easy, as I said, one of the best plays in the game is when you can line up and everybody in the world knows what you're doing and you're still successful at doing it. It's pretty impressive.
It is pretty impressive, as is Jerry Jones' ability to get headlines and drama going into a matchup and slight teams like the Philadelphia Eagles. This is sound of Jerry Jones talking about the Cowboys' upcoming match with the Niners and a bit of a clip that's gone viral now.
They are right now probably the most likely team to go in the Super Bowl. But in order for them to get there, they've got to go by us. You're playing the best. This is certainly, you don't need the game to tell you that you're playing the best, but you need the game to show you how you stack up against the best.
So Jerry Jones saying that about the San Francisco 49ers team that he's playing right now. Dad, should we interpret this as shade towards Philadelphia, the in-division rival?
Oh, probably. I mean, listen, whenever you have a shot to take a little shot at your division rival, why not do it? But I will say he is right. I mean, if you just look at the evidence out there, the 49ers are playing the best right now, right? I think the two best teams in the NFC are the Eagles and the 49ers. And the 49ers are more in their version of what they are than the Eagles are. That Eagles offense still needs to come along, and I think they will, and they're still getting wins along the way. And you don't need to be at your best right now. You need to be at your best later in the season. So I do think they're going to be right there. But right now, I think he's right. So I do think he is just telling the truth in this. And what a great matchup, right? I mean, for these two teams, two of the best without question. Especially the Dallas defense, which is second overall, second against the pass, middle of the pack against the run, giving up about 111, 112 yards. So it'll be interesting how San Francisco attacks. It's always interesting how they attack because they have so many weapons to attack.
Yeah, I think that's the part that's worrisome if you're the Cowboys is you got to have that little specter in the back of your head from the Arizona game where, the Cardinals were kind of able to go ahead and get some stuff done on the ground against you. Yep. I know that's sort of been their MO. And listen, the thing we've underrated with the Cardinals is Josh Dobbs' mobility. Yeah. Like if you're going to have a bad football team, I suggest you have a quarterback that's a viable run and scramble threat because it does so much and for your group up front. If you got a guy that can just pull the ripcord on a play, go off and burst for a bunch of yards when things break down, that is certainly not what the 49ers have, but the 49ers do all the other stuff, right? Like if you don't have a quarterback that can zone read, you've got to have all the motion stuff. You've got to have guys going the opposite way on the snap every play to give the defense something to think about that's not the quarterback here. And you've got outside of the Miami Dolphins, I would say probably the other most potent run game scheme in the NFL and what Kyle Shanahan and company have done there against a group up front where that's the spot to get them, Dad. The one thing going into every NFL game, and you know this, when you've got a D-line like the Dallas Cowboys, there are certain things everybody's just got to do. Wham block guys, throw screens, do misdirection stuff, give these high-priced pass rushers something to look at on each play to try and make them slow down a little bit. The 49ers got that in the bag. That's just their normal offense. And so all of that combined with the fact that, by the way, then it's Christian McCaffrey that's doing that. Then it's Brandon Ayuk as the number one receiver. Then Deebo Samuel's coming out of nowhere. George Kittle's over on that other side. They are like the Dolphins, the perfect combination of scheme and overwhelming talent to go and do the things you already have to do against a team like Dallas, but to do them with all pros.
Yeah, and talk about movement with a purpose too. The motioning that they do with the purpose of the stars that they have on that offense. Looking forward to it. Both excellent defenses. San Francisco's got multi-talented offense. So what's going to be the difference in this game? Obviously, we have time still this week to break it down, but this is the big matchup, I think, of two of the top three teams in the NFC.
Yeah, this is going to be a big one for Dak Prescott, who has quietly quelled the turnover problem from last year that people were so obsessed with, been highly productive in this offense, but now gets a 49ers opponent in the right stage to go and make this work. We'll talk to another guy who's been on the big stage in a lot of quarterback rooms, and Ryan Fitzpatrick next here on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. Hoping to talk to Ryan Fitzpatrick, former NFL quarterback, part of the great crew, helping you get ready for Thursday night football on Prime each and every week right now, as we've got the Bears and the Commanders coming up tomorrow night in a game, Dad, that I don't know if anyone's really excited about. I think for the Bears, there's just so many bad vibes around that organization, despite Justin Fields having played the best game, I would say, of his Bears tenure last week in an ultimate loss to the Denver Broncos, which, man, oh man, you talk about a team that was in must-win territory. It feels like that for the Bears to some extent. For the Broncos, that was desperation mode, coming off one of the most embarrassing losses you'll ever see. But now walking into the game this week, you've got on one side Sam Howell, who's the most sacked quarterback in football right now. The Commanders have surrendered 24 sacks on the young season, but there's also been a lot of good on the other side. Like, it has been, for Eric Bieniemy, I think as a play caller, the best start to the season you could have hoped for a guy that was wrongly maligned for being in the same coaching room as Andy Reid, who gets credit for that, rightly so, for actually calling the plays there, but had credit robbed of Eric Bieniemy in a way that did not affect his peers that had been in that room before him. And so he comes over here to try and do something to stir up the pot and show people, hey, I can do this. I've got this in my bag. And so far, Dad, through the first number of games for Sam Howell, who's a 5th-round pick and a guy who's certainly got ability, but we're seeing Eric Bieniemy's offense go out here and execute successfully in a way that so far through a quarter of the season has to be stock up for him as a guy who's potentially still trying to get into a head coaching job.
Completely agree. You know, for a division that we talked about that had 3 playoff teams last year, Philly, Dallas, and New York, Washington was left out of that. Now you look at this year and you have clearly Philly and Dallas, and then the other two, and now the Giants, just a dreadful start to them. Washington is sitting at 2-2. They were 2-0 out of the gate. Then they got smoked by the Bills bad. That was a bad one, 37-3. They lost to the Eagles 34-31. And that wasn't a game where Philly was up and Washington was just trying to catch them. This was never more than a 1-score game throughout. So they played Philly strong. Now, I don't think Philly's playing their best right now, but so what? You only go off what games you see and you're playing. And they were in that game. Like I said, 1 score throughout. So I do like the way they're playing. And this has been a year for Eric Bieniemy to kind of showcase himself as the play caller since he wasn't that in Kansas City. And I had said at the beginning of the year that I thought Sam Howell and Jordan Love were the two more of the non-established quarterbacks who played well in the preseason. But this guy's just getting hammered. 24 sacks. I mean, again, and it's not going to all be
part of that's on him.
Right. Not all going to be on the O-line, going to be on him as well. But you have 2 quarterbacks who you're going to see, unfortunately, go down, I think, in this game because Fields is 3rd in the league. There's Howell at 24, Daniel Jones 22 sacks. Now, the 10 he just took in the last game had a lot to do with that. And then Justin Fields has been sacked 17 times. So these quarterbacks have been going down quite a bit. And it has been on them as well, without question. Not all on the O-line, but you certainly, when that much pressure is getting on a quarterback, it's twofold. You got to have the quarterback make reads quicker, get rid of the ball or throw it away, or help with protection up front. So one of the two you got to do.
Like I say, you also got to have the quarterback. I mean, Sam Howell's still playing like he's at North Carolina.
Yes.
He was North Carolina's leading rusher his last year at that team. And it's because he's like super serum Baker Mayfield physically, where they have the same look first off with the beard and the hair and all that stuff. But he goes out there and is the much more mobile of the two. And he's a pretty strong guy. So you see him pinballing off dudes all the time. And that sort of confidence in your ability to extend plays tends to lead to that. But Dad, this is the ultimate stoppable force meets movable object game, because on one side, you've got the most sacked quarterback in football in Sam Howell. And on the other side, you've got the Bears, who are dead last in the NFL with 2 sacks on the year. Oh, like they have not been able to get to the quarterback at all. So we talked about this with Seattle the other night, where that had not been a team that had done well in sacking the quarterback. They had 5 on the season going into that Giants game and had 11 on the other side of that for a team that's not overly adept at that. For the Chicago Bears right now, if you can't get sacks and pressure in this game, it ain't coming all season long, buddy. This is just not going to be something that's in the cards, as we talk so much about the offense there, but the defense, that level of ineptitude at that particular place, putting pressure on the quarterback, is going to make it pretty difficult. On the other side, that they were sawing off resources on last year. We know personnel-wise, they have not put themselves in a position to win on that side of the ball, having to rely on a lot of young guys on that defense right now.
I mean, you said it, 2 sacks. They have 2 interceptions. They have no fumble recoveries. I mean, we kept saying the Arizona roster was probably the worst in the NFL, and they're a tough out for people right now. This Bears roster, it is, for a team we thought with some of the moves that they made, and to their credit, they went out and made moves. Now, maybe to their discredit, these moves aren't working, right? And down the Justin Fields basket by not getting rid of him and going for a different quarterback this past year. And man, I'm even surprised at how much it's not working. Now, I never thought they were going to be a playoff team. I never thought Justin Fields was going to be talked about for the MVP, but I thought he was going to improve, and I thought this team was going to show some improvement. And now you may be looking at a clean sweep of changes the way this is going. And that's awful to say in the first quarter of the season. But I mean, you just watch this team play and you wonder, where's the hope? And you're hearing the right things, right? Justin Fields saying, I think we're close. I think we're getting there. What the hell you want these guys to say?
I mean, you're hearing the right things now.
Yeah.
We just came off a stretch where they had to mysteriously have their defensive coordinator step down, got about $100,000 worth of gear stolen from the facility, had their quarterback and Justin Fields come out and make comments that alluded to coaching as one of the reasons why he was playing slower, and then have to revisit those comments after. And these guys just asked one of their receivers to stay home right now because they view him as a net negative on the effect overall in the locker room there. So this all, Dad, kind of leads to an indictment. And I saw Peter King write about this the other day, that he wouldn't be surprised if this went really sideways tomorrow night against the Commanders, in a way that's absolutely possible if the Bears thinking about making a change at head coach. Because, Dad, while I can't point to one real indelible mark of Matt Eberflus on this organization, maybe that's a problem for a guy who's a defensive-minded head coach coming over, not having any effect on that side of the ball. Certainly personnel go a long way in that, but all of the rest of this disarray reminds me of that term we hear in college football all the time, lack of institutional control right now. Yeah. It just doesn't feel like there are 2 hands on the wheels for the Bears at this point. I never want anyone to lose their job, but you wonder if a team in these dire straits might make a desperate decision before the season's over, as we mull maybe a potential quarterback change in the offseason and some of the other bigger questions the Bears are going to have.
It wouldn't shock me. And it certainly is not, I don't think, going to change the fortunes of this team, but they're in a bad place right now. Bad place on the field, bad place off the field, with no end in sight. So maybe the thought process is, we need to at least shake it up a little bit. We supposedly have NFL talent out here. We should be, in these games more. They were in the Denver game, obviously, but those are 2 awful teams playing one another. So it wouldn't shock me, because that's what happens, right? That's what happens. We go with the, let's make a change, because maybe that'll light a spark. It's not going to change the fortunes of this team this year. Will they play a little better? Maybe they will. It's not like all of a sudden they're going to be this playoff team. And then you're going to be looking for another head coach come the end of the season. So unless, what we don't know is how it is in the locker room, right? Though some of the things you just said kind of says what's going on in the locker room. And if your head coach has completely lost the locker room, then maybe it's something you do. Because that's where I talk about making a change during the season is if the locker room is gone and the coach has absolutely no yank in the locker room anymore. And when players are looking past the coach when he's talking, then yeah, it's probably time to make some kind of a change.
I will say I don't want to overrate too much, right? Justin Fields, a young player, maybe just misspeaking in public and having that become a thing. I don't want to put whatever happened with their defensive coordinator on Matt Eberflus. And even with the Chase Claypool stuff, part of that you could spin as, hey, this is a moment where the coach stepped up and is doing something resembling leadership, because it's saying, hey, we got a problem here, and so I'm going to stamp that out before it further infiltrates the locker room. But, Dad, my thought process is more on this front, and it's with less of a sample size, but look what the Arizona Cardinals did with Cliff Kingsbury. They fired him in the middle of the season because as they're staring down, we don't know if this could be Kyler Murray's last year in Arizona, depending on how they finish. I think the bigger question is for the Bears. If you're Ryan Poles and you're thinking about making a change at quarterback and making a new decision on that this offseason, is this the coach you want at the helm for whoever you pick next? Because for Ryan Poles, this is going to be it. If you make a change at quarterback or coach, the clock starts for you now too on that. And so I think that's part of the calculus, not just now, but what's going to end up happening this offseason, as it seemed like the Bears might have some big decisions to make. All right, coming up next, let's go back to college and take a look at the number 1 ranked Bulldogs next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and excited to be joined right now by a man in transit on his way to give you that goodness in leading up to Thursday Night Football. Commanders and Bears, former NFL quarterback and current analyst over at Prime, Ryan Fitzpatrick, joining us now here. And fresh off of, Ryan, you were just telling us we almost lost a chunk of the beard recently here. You almost lit your beard on fire?
Oh, I got in a real dangerous, precarious situation, just lighting a griddle, and the flame went up my arm and got the right side of my beard, singed a bunch of hair. So I had an emergency trip to the barber last week, and I was nervous about it. But thank God we don't have to see my face and what's under there.
Well, he saved it anyway. I mean, good save on the beard. What were you getting ready to grill, by the way?
Grilled cheese for the kids, I've got 7. My brother next door has 5. So we just do the assembly line with grilled cheese. That's about the best thing I can cook, but
hey, it works.
So how long have you been growing a beard that was almost taken down by grilled cheese then? Because the hang time on this is glorious.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this thing for quite a while. I think 2009, 2010 in Buffalo is the first time I realized I could actually grow one. And I used to cut it off once a year. I haven't cut it off for a few years now. So I really, really, really am happy that I was able to salvage it.
Yep. Keep your face away from that grill. Save the beard at all costs. All right. You're getting ready to go and be part of the Thursday night game. And we were just talking about that. So one kind of overall question in this game, we talked about Sam Howell, quarterback for the Commanders, sacked the most. Justin Fields sacked the 3rd most. You've been sacked a few times in your NFL career as well. We were talking about Daniel Jones earlier getting sacked as much as he did, and how maybe there wasn't the adjustments to protect better by chipping, by tight ends, by running backs. At what point do you think teams where quarterbacks are getting beat up, and sometimes it's their fault too, we have to understand that, where you have to change what you're doing up front with protection to help more?
Yeah, I think when you take that many sacks, I mean, Daniel Jones getting sacked 11 times, Sam Howell 9 or 10 times in a game, there are multiple issues. One of them being the quarterback holding on to it too long. Other ones being, what is the scheme? Can we get it out quicker? Can we chip, like you said? Can we move the pocket a little bit so there's not so much pressure on those guys up front? But, with Sam Howell going into this game, he is playing some great football. If you take out that Bills game, he's going to have some growing pains, but he's playing awesome. A simple thing with him is just depth of his drop. He's getting past that 10-yard range, and that puts a lot of strain on those tackles to be able to create a pocket. So he just, in terms of processing and getting things, he's doing a great job. But when he freezes up and doesn't know what's going on, that's when you see those problems with those sacks. Daniel Jones, multitude of issues, but I think they can work on getting the ball out quicker as well.
For the other quarterback in this game, in Justin Fields, a lot's been made of the team's approach, the lack of design rushing attempts at the beginning of the season, a number of things. Do you think Luke Getsy and this Bears offense are doing enough to put Justin Fields in positions to succeed?
Last week, played great, and who knows if that's because it was the Denver defense that just gave up 70 points to Miami, or that was Chicago figuring something out. But I will say, when you watch this offense, they have weapons. I mean, Herbert in the backfield, they brought in DJ Moore. Darnell Mooney's one of the more underrated receivers. Cole Kmet, your guys' Notre Dame boy, he had a couple touchdowns last week, but there's some issues there. And, Justin Fields, he aired it out a couple weeks ago in the media, and I felt like that put more pressure on Justin to get out there and make some plays. Didn't necessarily have the best game after that, but then, last week, wow, he played so well, especially in the first 3 quarters of that game. I'm looking for more of that. We're hoping for more of that. Last year, these guys, we got a 12-7, a beauty of a game, but I think there's going to be, like you guys said, a lot more sacks. But there should be more points on the board as well.
As far as changes, it happens every year, and you never wish for anybody to lose their job. But people talking about Matt Eberflus, the head coach, or Matt Canada, the O coordinator in Pittsburgh, to not be calling plays anymore, possibly for Kenny Pickett. Do you think changes like that during the season, especially early or midway in the season, do you think they really make a difference on a team for the current year?
I think they can, and it is tough because calling plays is not easy. You can't just pick a guy off the staff that's never done it before and say, hey, you're up. But sometimes you get to a point where it's bad enough to where anything is better than what's happening. So it's definitely something I've seen in my career, something I've had to live through. When you do that, there are obviously growing pains, but sometimes you get past the point of no return where you've got to make some sort of change or you're going to lose the guys in that locker room.
Ryan, you've seen and played a lot of quarterback in your career, and I always feel like every specific position has things that they look for that signify, oh, someone's really great at what we do in this position. And we see a lot of conversation in the NFL right now about quarterbacks in certain systems. Brock Purdy in San Francisco's system, Tua down in Miami with the Dolphins. When you look at a quarterback, how do you separate what that player is bringing to the position versus what's the product of the system around him in a way that fans sometimes struggle with?
Yeah, I always think that's an interesting conversation because, for a guy like Tua, who struggled, early on in his career, Mike McDaniel comes in and it really is tailor-made to his skill set. So I don't know why it matters, that it's tailor-made to his skill set, and that's why he's succeeding. The key is that he's succeeding and that he's playing really well. Brock Purdy, he's still not getting enough attention. If you watch this guy play, he's an absolute machine. It's unbelievable, what he's doing. Yes, in that system, but Kyle Shanahan trusts Brock Purdy more than any quarterback he's ever had in his career at this point, especially in San Francisco, which is amazing.
What would you say is the thing Brock Purdy does best for people that haven't watched or given him enough credit at this point?
Yeah, I mean, he processes. And people don't understand with Brock Purdy. Last year, he was battling to be the number 3. Came in the middle of the year and won those games for him and won the playoff games. That was him without having any reps in the preseason. So I don't think people understand how amazing this kid is at processing information, at always making the right decision. And then, he's tailor-made for that offense because his accuracy. He may not be able to throw the ball, 75 yards down the field, but he's going to be able to hit Deebo Samuel and Ayuk in stride. And the run after catch is such a huge thing in that offense. His accuracy is great.
Yeah, it's great insight. We really appreciate it. He is one of the more, I think, polarizing quarterbacks in the league right now because he has played so well and specifically on that team. Ryan, we know you got a travel day ahead of you. Travel safe. We're glad the beard is intact, and we're all looking forward to watching you on the desk with everybody else getting ready for Thursday night football. Thanks, brother.
All right. Nice talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. What a horrible experience that would have to be, right?
Dude,
almost losing a beard? That'd be terrible. Oh my God.
I called my wife.
Worried.
I called my wife and I was like, I don't know what I look like. I'm heading to the mirror right now. But like that burnt hair smell too. It stuck with me for like 48 hours. It was so gross.
There's nothing like it. It's that feeling of when you get hit in the teeth and you haven't gotten to see a mirror and you're not sure, are they all there? Am I going to be spitting chiclets right now? And so that distance from the moment you got hit to the time you get in front of the mirror, I'm sure it had to feel like an eternity. Oh, it's incredible.
Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No doubt.
Oh my God.
All right.
Incredible.
Thanks,
incredible stuff there for Ryan Fitzpatrick.
But you're right, though. You're right. When you can't see it and you want to get to a mirror and you're like, oh my God, how bad is this going to be when I get there?
I'll never forget when I was getting ready for training camp with the Steelers. I came back, and that was Zach Martin, Chris Watt, their last year in South Bend on campus. So I came back to work out with them, work out with our old island coach, and I was out on the field doing some drills. We were non-padded, no helmets on, and we were doing some pass rush drills. And one of the guys that was helping us out went for an arm over on me, and I had my head too close, and I got popped right in the head. And I grabbed my head, and I could feel it hurting. And all of a sudden, I pull it away, and I look at Zach, and I go, how's it look? And he goes, put your hand back on that. I had cut open the whole top of my head, was bleeding all over the place, and needed a bunch of stitches that made me look like a pirate in Steelers training camp and started me off on the right foot right there. We'll finish this off with this, that, and the third next. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. We're going to finish this off the way we always do with this, that, and the third. As always, thank you to our guests, Charlotte Wilder and Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you missed any of that, make sure you go download, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Leave us that 5-star rating and check out all of that available wherever you get your podcasts. Dad, let's get to this and start off with this one. 3 quick stories to send everyone off into their day. James Harden, reportedly, on his way to 76ers training camp and ready to make this uncomfortable. Per Adrian Wojnarowski at ESPN, it sounds like the 76ers superstar, who has publicly blasted their GM Daryl Morey and done a number of other things to try and get himself out of the scene, said, quote, Wojnarowski did, James Harden wants a trade. He wants to make the 76ers uncomfortable. So uncomfortable, ultimately, they don't think they'll get the best out of him and make a trade. Dad, we are watching an artist paint in their preferred medium right now. I hope everyone appreciates greatness while we have it, because you're about to watch James Harden, a man who has once reportedly, debatably, worn a fat suit, openly subverted the team by giving absolute piss poor effort on the basketball court in the middle of actual games, and most recently gone to lambasting Daryl Morey publicly at an Adidas-sponsored event in China. I have no idea what he was going to do. I said he should shave the beard. There are a few things at this point that could probably make me more uncomfortable than a clean-shaven James Harden face walking into training camp, but I'm open to ideas right now, and I'm going to be deferential to the GOAT, because make no mistake, when it comes to doing this specific thing, James Harden is the unquestioned greatest of all time.
We always say about that players can have the power in the NBA. They have a lot of power, and how far are you willing to go? We said this with running backs, right? Running backs not happy, a Saquon Barkley, a Jonathan Taylor. How far are you willing to go? Are you willing to sit out? You're willing to draw a line in the sand? How far are you willing to go in your convictions? James Harden is obviously willing to go as far as he has to go to get what he wants. And I'm not a particular fan of it, in all honesty, because my thought is, wherever he goes next, what if he's not happy there? Then you know how he's going to act. You know what he's going to do. He's a guy that's been one of the great players we've seen, changed the game, though some people think for the worse with all the isolation things, has not come up big in the playoffs when you need him to, with a player supposedly that great. So to me, is he worth it? Is he worth the fact that all of a sudden, if things aren't going well, that he's going to be the biggest pain in your ass that you can think of to get his way out there? This one kind of turns me off. I mean, this one really does, that a player goes this far, but I understand he's in it for himself. He's in it to get what he wants, and people are allowed to do that. And if you can get away with it, you're going to do it. Again, it's just a matter of how far you're willing to go. And we see how far he's willing to go. I'm just not a fan of going this far to actually making it uncomfortable for your team to get to it. Like I said, I'm not taking him. I'm not taking on a guy that if he doesn't all of a sudden like where he is, he's going to become a big problem for a guy who doesn't have any rings to his name, and we have seen him not show up or disappear, I would say, in the playoffs. So not happening for me, not coming on my team.
James Harden is a serial cheater in relationships where each subsequent new spouse thinks, oh, it'll be different with me this time.
Exactly.
Because I've got everything he wants and needs, only to find out that, much like in the tale of the scorpion and the frog, sometimes you just are what you are. So because I don't have to deal with this as a teammate, which would absolutely be maddening to have to defer to someone who is extremely talented and has been successful, but ultimately will likely betray you the moment it stops being advantageous for them. As an onlooker, I'm just excited to watch what the guy comes up with to make this thing deeply uncomfortable. We've seen hold-ins in the NFL for guys that come in and don't want to lose the paycheck. James Harden is going full insurgent on this one. He is going to come in and try and destabilize the region right now in Philadelphia. So we will see how that goes for James Harden. Let's get to that, Dad. This is an interesting one here that we saw. I think everyone, and we had Scott Hansen on at the start of the NFL season, is fascinated with trying to find their version of what the NFL has tapped into with the Red Zone channel. And ESPN's going to try that right now. And I saw John Buccigross retweet this, but per The Beauty League on Twitter, ESPN is creating an NHL version of the Red Zone channel called Frozen Frenzy. It will occur starting on October 28th, the night all 32 NHL teams play. The broadcast will be hosted by John Buccigross and is set to show every goal, power play, and hit. People wondering, will this be enough to get you to tune into it? Dad, I think it's an awesome idea and an awesome potentially to get this going, but I think it's interesting to see how it gets fitted to other sports here. Football, you've got such a clear line of demarcation. You've got a sport that plays with more gaps in between. We know hockey, part of the difficulty is it is nonstop. We've said it's one of the most difficult sports to call for that reason, especially for play-by-play guys, because you can't ever really look down. And so John Buccigross is a man who lives and breathes this sport in a way that very few do. I'm fascinated to watch and see how they try and go and use these specific markers to try and recreate what's become a sensation for the NFL over the last decade.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you said is it's nonstop compared to football, where you have stoppage and you can jump to another game, where here it's nonstop, and as soon as you leave a game, there could be a score that you missed. But I love the attempt. I do love the attempt. I will certainly watch something like this. I am a hockey fan. For the casual hockey fan, I don't know if it'll be too much because the game moves at such a fast speed, but I do like trying. I remember Fox years ago. Remember they tried the blue puck or the glowing puck?
Yeah, the glowing
that
puck
had a tail on it, but sometimes it looked like it was in the fourth row, unfortunately. But I give them credit for trying, because you want to make the game more palatable to the casual fan because it does move so fast. You lose the puck at times. So trying something innovative for the fans, I think it's great. I hope it works. I have no idea how it's going to, because the sports run so differently, do football and hockey, but I'm glad they're trying, and I'm certainly going to check it out.
It's going to be on ESPN Plus from 7 to 8 o'clock that night, and then ESPN2 the rest of the night. And it seems like a trial balloon to where, if this goes well, is it something that they might potentially do on other days where you've got a high influx of this, certainly once you get to the postseason. Because to your point, Dad, look at what Major League Baseball found with the pitch clock this year. Almost every metric you can point to for viewership and otherwise is up. And while you can attribute that to a lot of things, young stars in the game, I think in no small part, there is some credit owed to the fact that that product is moving faster. They took feedback about their game and understood the diehards are going to be here. We're not going to mess with it too much, but we're going to do this. And now for the NHL, looking at the most successful league in North American sports in the NFL and trying to look at one of the reasons why it's been so accessible to fans, you need look no further than our Instagram page, where a video of Scott Hansen talking about yelling 7 hours of commercial-free football at a grocery store has 750,000 views right now. It's a phenomenon, and the NHL is going to try and tap into that in a way that I am very excited about. Dad, let's get to the third, though, because speaking of phenomenon, it's back. I didn't know it was back. I forgot it was gone, but apparently the McRib is making its return. Dad, after a farewell tour in 2022 by a sandwich at McDonald's, they have now decided once again, like most of Hollywood, it's time for the reboot. So the McRib is coming back in select locations in 2023. I've never had a McRib, Dad. Have you had a McRib?
Oh my God. I've had many a McRib. I mean, and this was supposed to be done in 22, right? I mean, it was supposed to be gone forever. But as McDonald's has says, it turns out not everyone was ready to say goodbye to the McRib after last year's farewell tour. Great marketing play, by the way. Say it's the end and it's not really the end. So
yeah, I mean, we've seen so many places. IHOP did the burgers thing a while back with this. We all took Taco Bell to task for doing away with the Mexican pizza. So all of these things seem to go back around this. This one's going to be only in participating markets, and it's going to return by mid-November this weekend as well. So, or this season as well. So I'm excited to try my first McRib.
I'm surprised you haven't tried it. I really, it's very good. I mean, listen, you're not going to eat it and say, oh my God, it's the best fast food sandwich I've ever had in my life, but it's something different. And I am actually somewhat surprised in someone in our family. We are a food family that you have not tried the McRib.
Yeah. You know what? And I got a lot of people saying, oh, it's bad. Oh, it tastes like shoe leather, all this, that, and the third about it. Like, listen, I'll make that decision for me. You guys have seen I'm a trash panda. I'm going to throw anything I can in the gullet here, and I'm going to try and make it work. And so for science, I owe it to myself to try this. I owe it to myself to get the experience out of this.
I agree. Do it in your car like you do your candy bars, and let's get a review.
McRib review incoming this November. Give us a review and a subscription and a download wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.